Background and causes. Slavery. Economic dependency. The Southern economy was heavily dependent on agriculture, particularly cotton, which relied on slave labor. In contrast, the northern states were more industrialized and had a mixed economy. Moral and political debate. The abolitionist movement in the North gained momentum in the early 19th century, arguing against the moral and ethical implications of slavery. The South viewed these movements as direct threats to their way of life and economy. States' rights. Doctrine of nullification. The idea that states could nullify federal laws they deemed unconstitutional gained popularity in the South. This concept was rooted in a belief in the sovereignty of states over the federal government. Secession. Southern states argued that they had the right to secede from the Union if the federal government infringed upon their rights, particularly regarding slavery. Economic differences. Tariffs. The North favored high tariffs on imported goods to protect its growing industries, while the South opposed these tariffs because they increased the cost of goods and harmed the export of cotton. Infrastructure. The North supported federal funding for infrastructure projects like roads, canals, and railroads, which would facilitate industrial growth. The South was less enthusiastic about these projects, viewing them as benefiting the North disproportionately. Key events leading to war. Missouri Compromise, 1820. This compromise allowed Missouri to enter the Union as a slave state and Maine as a free state, maintaining the balance between slave and free states. It also established the 36 degrees 30 minutes parallel as the dividing line for future admission of free and slave states. Compromise of 1850. The compromise included several measures. California was admitted as a free state, the Fugitive Slave Act was strengthened, and popular sovereignty was applied to the new territories of Utah and New Mexico, allowing them to decide on slavery. Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854. This act allowed the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to decide on the issue of slavery through popular sovereignty. It led to violent conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers in Kansas, known as Bleeding Kansas. Dred Scott Decision, 1857. The Supreme Court ruled that African Americans were not citizens and had no right to sue in federal court. It also declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, stating that Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery in the territories. John Brown's Raid, 1859. Abolitionist John Brown led a raid on the federal armory at Harper's Ferry, intending to incite a slave rebellion. The raid failed, and Brown was captured and executed, but it heightened sectional tensions. Election of Abraham Lincoln, 1860. Lincoln's election as president, on a platform opposing the expansion of slavery, was seen as a direct threat by the Southern states. His victory, without any support from the Southern states, led to the secession of South Carolina, followed by other Southern states. The War. Secession. Following Lincoln's election, 11 Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. Jefferson Davis was elected President of the Confederacy. Fort Sumter, April 1861. The war began when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. The fort's commander, Major Robert Anderson, eventually surrendered. Lincoln responded by calling for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. Major battles. First Battle of Bull Run, July 1861, also known as the First Battle of Manassas, it was the first major battle of the war. Confederate forces, led by Generals Joseph E. Johnston and P.G.T. Beauregard, defeated Union troops, leading to a chaotic retreat and shattering Northern hopes for a quick victory. Battle of Antietam, September 1862, fought near Sharpsburg, Maryland. It was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history, with over 22,000 casualties. The battle ended in a tactical draw, but it gave President Lincoln the opportunity to issue the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Battle of Gettysburg, July 1863. This three-day battle in Pennsylvania was a turning point in the war. Union forces, under General George G. Meade, defeated General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army, ending Lee's invasion of the North. The battle resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. Siege of Vicksburg, May-July 1863. Union forces, led by General Ulysses S. Grant, captured the strategic city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, after a prolonged siege. This victory gave the Union control of the Mississippi River, effectively splitting the Confederacy in two. Emancipation Proclamation, January 1863. Issued by President Lincoln after the Battle of Antietam, it declared all slaves in Confederate-held territory free. While it did not immediately free all slaves, it transformed the character of the war by adding the abolition of slavery as a Union war aim and discouraged European powers from recognizing the Confederacy. Total war strategy. Grant and Sherman. Generals Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman implemented a strategy of total war, aimed at breaking the South's will to fight. Sherman's march to the sea from Atlanta to Savannah devastated Southern infrastructure and resources, aiming to undermine civilian support for the Confederacy. Naval warfare and blockades. The Union implemented a naval blockade, known as the Anaconda Plan, to cut off supplies to the Confederacy. The blockade slowly choked Southern trade and resources. Additionally, the war saw significant naval battles, including the clash between the ironclads USS Monitor and CSS Virginia. Conclusion. Surrender at Appomattox, April 1865. General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, marking the effective end of the Civil War. Other Confederate forces surrendered in the following weeks. Assassination of Lincoln, April 1865. Just days after Lee's surrender, President Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater. His death left the nation mourning and created uncertainty about the future of Reconstruction. Aftermath. Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877. Presidential and congressional Reconstruction, initially led by President Andrew Johnson, Reconstruction aimed to reintegrate the Southern states into the Union and rebuild the South. Radical Republicans in Congress later took control, imposing stricter requirements for readmission and greater protections for formerly enslaved people. Freedmen's Bureau, established to assist formerly enslaved people by providing food, housing, education, and medical care. It played a crucial role in helping African Americans transition from slavery to freedom. Amendments. 13th Amendment, 1865 abolished slavery throughout the United States. 14th Amendment, 1868 granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States and guaranteed equal protection under the law. 15th Amendment, 1870 prohibited denying the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Economic and social changes. Southern economy. The war devastated the Southern economy, leading to a transition from a slave-based economy to one characterized by sharecropping and tenant farming. This system often kept African Americans in a cycle of debt and poverty. Industrial growth. The war accelerated industrialization in the North, solidifying its economic dominance. The demand for war supplies spurred innovation and expansion in various industries. Legacy and memory. Veterans and memorials. Both Union and Confederate veterans formed organizations to commemorate their experiences and honor their fallen comrades. Memorials and monuments were erected across the country. Reconciliation and division. While the war resolved the issue of secession and ended slavery, it left lingering divisions and racial tensions. The struggle for civil rights continued for more than a century, culminating in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The American Civil War was a transformative period in U.S. history, fundamentally altering the nation's political, social, and economic landscape. Its legacy continues to influence American society and its collective memory.